You could say that it began in 1991 when Neverwinter Nights was released, making it the first massively multiplayer online game, or MMO for short. Since then, popularity of these types of games have only grown. Grown so much that they are their own hubs of virtual life with thriving populations, economies, politics, and drama. What's the appeal of playing a game where you are amongst thousands, maybe even millions of people all playing the same game at once? What is it that drives gamers to invest so much time in a game that may not even have an end? And why do some game developers just flat out suck at making these types of games? Listen in as we discuss the topic of MMOs right here on Downloadable Content. Welcome to this edition of Downloadable Content. I am Brian, and with me today, it is a double Ron show. We have Ron.
Hello, everyone.
And Ronnie.
Greetings.
Welcome back. This is going to be an interesting episode. Interesting indeed. Talking about MMOs. A subject, a genre of the gaming industry that I am, to be fully honest, I have no idea what goes on in the land of MMOs. Having never played one myself, this episode will help me, hopefully, by the time we reach the end, allow me to have a better understanding of MMOs and what they're all about, because my limited knowledge of them basically is like, well, why are people willing to spend so much time and money in a game that goes on forever? I like my video games to have a definitive beginning, middle, and end. I like to just plunk down the $50 and be done with it.
Well, one thing I think we should bring up early on in this is what your definition of MMOs is for this broadcast, because it's a little bit broader than a lot of people might expect.
All right. Then I'll start with you.
Well, I was bringing it up to you that we're not just talking about traditional MMORPGs. We're also talking about large multiplayer games like StarCraft.
Oh yes,
or the
yes. That's
or,
yes. For this episode, we're not going to be. It's not. I said MMOs. It's a massively multiplayer online game that encompasses RPGs, shooters, adventure games, bulletin board style games. And while I know that, the more popular ones are RPGs, there are other genres out there which we will get into. So, that is that. So, starting off with early MMOs, I mentioned Neverwinter Nights in the intro, which I have heard of, shockingly enough.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It was a very popular game back in the day, so I'm not surprised.
Even though I've never played it, it debuted on AOL. Remember that ancient thing? In 1991, and it's widely considered to be the first really successful MMO. There were games before it, but none that reached the level of popularity that Neverwinter Nights did back in the early 90s.
Well, previous to Neverwinter Nights, you had the MUDs, and you had, like, the rogues and the dungeons, which, all pretty much were, just text-based stuff. Neverwinter Nights was the first one that really gave you a graphical interface, which is what brought it to the masses.
Basically went, ooh, pictures!
Exactly. Who likes to stare at text all day?
Although
Programmers.
Yeah, exactly.
Although I have played text-based RPGs, like the early Zork games, and I was
yes.
And I was just like, wow. It's like, you have walked into a room. There is a table, and on this table there's a knife. Your directions are north, south, and west. What do you do?
It's like I'm really there.
And then Neverwinter Nights, as I said, it's the first one to have pictures, and
It's based on the strongest graphics chip imaginable, your imagination.
gasp.
Okay, let's continue.
Moving right along. Either one of you actually ever played Neverwinter Nights?
Yes. It's been many years.
The MMO? No, I played the PC version that came out about 10 years later. That was just a single-player game.
Well, besides from being the first MMO to include graphics, what was its draw? I mean, it was on AOL, and in the early 90s, AOL was the shit.
Everyone was on AOL.
Oh, yeah. All the cool
Because
kids.
that's the only thing that existed, really.
All the cool kids were on AOL in the early 90s.
Even back then I hated AOL, but there was no other option where I was.
That's very true. Back in the days of dial-up.
To be honest, I played Neverwinter Nights, the original incarnation of it, but I was so young at this point, I could not tell you much about it. It was... I mean, there were only, if I remember correctly, you only had like 50 or so people that played together on one server on it. So you didn't quite get the social aspects of it that you get in the later MMOs.
Well, no. I mean, obviously they had to start small. They're not like the giant MMO games that you have today,
where you have more than 50 people in a city.
Where you have the millions and millions of people on servers all going on at once. And as we progress, there are other games that I had heard of. I mean, the Ultima series.
Mm-hmm.
EverQuest was a big one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, EverQuest. If anything, Neverwinter Nights was what brought graphical MMOs there, but EverQuest is what made the market. EverQuest was the first one to actually break into the mainstream and have people outside of computer geeks who'd heard of it. Yeah, exactly.
The EverQuest was probably the first MMO, in my opinion, that had any sort of noticeable marketing outside of the game magazine, and also got quite a bit of press, both good and bad. Mostly bad is because people were spending hours upon hours playing it and losing physical relationships, losing jobs, stuff like that.
Well, it also, EverQuest also sort of spearheaded the game design of MMOs that even to this day is still being followed. People are finally starting to break from some of the negative ones that EverQuest brought with it, that people just accepted. The endless grinding, which you have the extremely low random drop rates on items. I mean, a lot of what people think of from World of Warcraft now, all of them were originally from EverQuest, and were a lot worse than EverQuest.
Yeah, at least in World of Warcraft, they dropped the de-leveling possibility, because that sucked ass in EverQuest.
Yeah, Brian, I don't know if you knew this. In original EverQuest, you would lose experience and levels whenever you died.
Ooh.
Permanently. And especially since at certain points in the game, when you get high enough, every time how much you need to level up exponentially increases. And it gets to a point where gaining one level when you're close to level cap takes as long as all of the levels before it combined.
Wow.
And losing that much experience, from a couple deaths, you could lose weeks. Or sometimes, depending on how many you might spend on one guy, you might lose months of work.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've never heard of any video game that does that.
Ultima Online was pretty brutal too, where you had 3 stats, and if you died, you lost all your gear.
I know that, on the console game, I know Dragon Quest gets pretty harsh. when you die. But damn, losing level, wow.
Yeah.
And despite this, people still flocked to EverQuest, knowing
they considered it part of the difficulty. I
yeah,
mean, it was.
It's a challenge. It's the concept that we had during talking about Dark Souls and Demon Souls. This is a challenge worthy of my time and effort. Because once I conquer this game, I'm going to be really good in terms of like stats and gear and stuff like that. And people will look to me for knowledge.
World of Warcraft was actually criticized for the fact that it removed really permanent character damage from dying. In World of Warcraft, you would take durability damage, which would hurt your equipment. So it would take some money from you to repair the equipment, but it didn't do anything else to your character when you died. And it was a pretty minor inconvenience compared to everything had done up to that point. Because EverQuest and just about everything that came after EverQuest all had brutal death mechanics. I didn't play it, but I think Anarchy Online had an even worse one, didn't it? Where you would you'd lose experience when you died, but also any nearby players could pick up your items or something ridiculous like that.
It was pretty weird.
Is EverQuest still going on today?
Yes.
Yes, both original and sequel. I think the original still has a couple servers up.
That's impressive, considering that EverQuest came out in March of 1999.
Well, here's the thing. EverQuest did at least 3 full graphical upgrades through their expansion packs, where they actually completely redid the graphics for the entire game.
Because damn.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, last time I heard, the original EverQuest was actually doing better than EverQuest 2 at this point.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, hell, I'm looking at EverQuest now. I mean, they released an expansion in November of last year. So, I mean, it is still going.
Still chugging along.
And I just looked up Anarchy Online since I just brought it up to check and make sure I was right. I didn't realize that is still going on.
And how long has that one been out?
2001, so not quite as... But that's still, over 10
That's still
years.
really long, considering it's 11 years old. I wonder if EverQuest holds the record for the longest concurrent MMO running.
I don't know. I actually think that EverQuest is not the longest running, because I think one of the smaller ones from before it is still around, but EverQuest definitely is the best known one that's still going.
Yeah.
And I seem to think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that, until not that long ago, MMOs were primarily confined to PCs.
Yes. Up until... God, 1 second, I was just looking at that.
Fantasy 11?
No, I think it was Phantasy Star Online.
Yeah, Phantasy Star. That's what it was. That was Dreamcast and PC, I think.
Yep. It was Dreamcast and PC, and it went to the GameCube later.
Because by that point, we actually started to have consoles with online capability. Now we had video game consoles that could handle connecting to the internet and things like that. I mean, now you can play MMOs with your PS3 or your 360. Nintendo is still trying to figure out what a network is.
We have networks. They're called friend codes.
Ooh. I'm curious to see how Square is going to pull off a Wii-only MMO in the form of Dragon Quest X. But we'll talk more about that later.
Mm-hmm.
So when we already know, you mentioned before that, Ryan, you don't have a lot of experience with MMOs. Maybe it'd be good for me and Ron to talk about our experiences, like what we've actually played and what we've done with them.
Go right ahead.
You want to go first, Ron? Or?
Yeah, my list is fairly small. I knew about MMOs for a while, since EverQuest. I never really got a chance to play it. My first MMO, I guess, if you want to call it an MMO, is Ragnarok Online.
Okay, I've never heard of that, but
It's a Korean-style MMO. It's pretty easy to play. It's 2D isometric view, similar to Super Mario RPG.
That definitely counts. That definitely counts as an MMO. It's just a little bit of a different style, which we'll probably be talking about at some point.
Yeah.
okay.
I played that for a month. And then my next real MMO was Aeon. I mentioned it previously in a podcast, and I still play that to this day. And that came out almost 3 years ago. And the most recent one I've begun playing is the Star Wars MMO, the new one, The Old Republic. And that's like 2 or 3 months old now. And I guess if you include Brian's broader scope, I've played StarCraft and StarCraft 2 as well.
Okay.
That's pretty much all the MMO experience I have.
Okay then.
Well, I've heard of StarCraft. Obviously, that's a very popular one. I know some friends who play that. And I've heard of some of the ones that you've mentioned. But again, I haven't played them. Because again, I don't. Well, first of all, I can't afford shelling out a subscription fee. Because I know some of these games have to have a subscription fee. I know Warcraft definitely does.
Some of them are free to play though, and we'll probably be talking about those. Okay. Well, for me, for MMOs, probably, if you were taking the broader definition, I started with StarCraft. Well, actually, no. If we're taking I started with, way back in the day, I played a couple of the MUDs, which I really didn't know what I was doing or what was going on at that point. I was just a little kid messing around with stuff because I knew some stuff about computers, nowhere near as much as I thought I did. But my first real one was going into StarCraft, and then World of Warcraft after that. I was a huge fan of the Warcraft series, so I ended up signing up, and I actually got into the original World of Warcraft beta. And I've been playing the game off and on literally ever since. I actually haven't played it in about a year at this point, and that's the longest break I've ever taken from the game. But in between playing World of Warcraft, I've done a little bit of EverQuest with one of my friends. I played Tabula Rasa extensively up until it shut down. I've touched probably at least 10 or more MMOs, just plain things occasionally. City of Heroes, and Guild Wars, which, what I was going to say, Brian, is probably the best known, or one of the best known of the free MMOs that don't require any cost to play. But yeah, that's my history.
Well, now that you both have thrown up your resumes there, your MMO histories there, one of the biggest questions I have with regards to MMOs, and this is a question that probably has many, many answers to it, is what is the draw of an MMO? I mean, as I said earlier, I like my games to have a definitive beginning, middle, and end. I like plunking down the $50 for a game, knowing full well that, it's a one-time shot and, I'm going to get a good story out of it. I mean, yes, it's a single-player experience, but, I enjoy that type of play. I may not want to interact with, millions of other gamers at once. So, what's the draw?
Well, I suppose the difference is one of the major ones of. Keep in mind, somebody who plays MMOs, most of us are gamers who are going to be playing the same type of games you're playing as well. This is something different. You're not always going to want to play with millions of people. but you can when you want to. The cooperative team aspects, especially in World of Warcraft, is a major draw. Of you have to work with a group of people, plan together to be able to defeat certain things. To be honest, in some instances, I found MMOs to actually be quite a bit more difficult because of the teamwork aspects than a lot of single-player games.
Okay.
Yeah, I can agree with that because, like, for MMOs, or for single-player games, you know your skill. Like, you know what you're good at, what you're bad at, and you can generally kind of fudge/force your way through most of those difficult sections to get to the end point. But you don't really know the other skill of the other players you play with. They could be better than you, they could be worse than you, they could have similar skill sets than you, or to you, and say for example you are running a particular instance or a zone for the first time with this group of people, generally you're gonna make a lot of mistakes and you gotta try and keep a cool head, but there's all kinds out there on the internet. You're gonna come across people who are as level-headed as you, or get pissed at you because you died, or are under some sort of chemical substance, because it seems to happen quite a bit more than I would prefer to have. But it's sometimes the challenge is not in just the game itself, but also the social communication issues as well.
One thing to keep in mind, what you were saying, Ryan, is that a lot of MMOs do have a beginning, middle, and end. They do have an ongoing story. A good way to think about it for people who haven't played it before is to think of it kind of like Mass Effect or Dragon Age, where when the new game comes out, you can import in all your settings from the old one. Well, that's kind of the way it is when a expansion pack comes out, or even new regular content for an MMO, because I'll use World of Warcraft as an example because that's the one I played the most. You can reach endgame in World of Warcraft. There is a final boss, but the reason you keep paying for it is because new content continues to come out. They will put out new things every month or every couple months to expand the game, and that's not even paying for an expansion pack. And then when an expansion pack comes up and they open up a whole new section of the game with new storylines and a new end boss and everything else, you can take the character that you've invested this time in and continue with it. It's kind of like, as I said, I actually haven't played Mass Effect, but I've been told that you can import your character one. It's like playing through the original Mass Effect, beating the game, having all the stuff, and then being able to import it into the next game.
That is true with Mass Effect. You can, once you finish the first game, you can then import, all of your character data into the second game, and so on. What is the subscription fees like for MMOs?
About 15.
So 50, and that's per month.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's about most of them are about $15 a month. There's a whole new range of MMOs right now doing micropayments, which they're free to pay to play games, but you can buy bonuses to your character, or buy additional outfits, or buy weapons, or you can pay little amounts, only a couple, $1 or less, to give your character additional bonuses, and that's how the game survives.
Now,
some games also have a quote-unquote subscription bonus where, say for example, you think this is going to be an MMO you're going to play for a while, you can plop down like $60 in the subscription fee and you'll get 6 months worth of subscription service. The general average is $15 a month, but you could pay more upfront to eventually have it be less per month.
Well, Ronnie, you said that you haven't played World of Warcraft in a year. Have you been paying every month since?
No, there's only one MMO that does something like that. With World of Warcraft, you can cancel anytime you like, your character stays there, and you can come back anytime you want to pick back up where you left off. Most MMOs work like that.
Okay, because,
The one exception, and we're going to be getting to this because I know it was in your description, was Final Fantasy XI.
Oh, yes. We are definitely going to talk about Final Fantasy XI and 14. But yeah, I mean, that's a good thing then, because, especially if you have, people who take long breaks from Warcraft, if you're going to be paying $15 a month, and you decide you're not going to play for about a year, it's like, are you still paying for it that whole time? But apparently not.
I mean, there are certain games that do give you a benefit, or used to. For Aeon example, they are just getting off of what they call the Veteran Reward program, because they're going to free to play, where if you subscribe for the game, you would get in-game benefits like if you had a subscription that was up to a year, you got a bunch of different items and some unique little pets as well, and some other like emotes and stuff. Which is sort of like a way to reward the player for staying with the game for so long. And some of that stuff is nice because it gives you a boost in leveling if you make a new character, or it's a nice outfit, or it's the Korean style MMO, so it kind of helps get you a leg up in that grind for that end game content.
Okay, that's I can see how that could work for some games.
One other thing I'll bring up for why people enjoy MMOs is something that you expect in first-person shooters, but you wouldn't really expect in RPGs. A lot of them are sold on the PvP aspects, which are the aspects of being able to fight against other players in the game. Many ones have an arena system. Many ones have a world PvP system where you can just kill anyone anywhere, and just jump them. And the people are sold on this style gameplay where when you have scripted fights in any game, every game has them. Whenever you fight a computer, there's an underlying program. But when you do PvP, when you're going up against another human, it's unexpected. It can be very difficult. It can be, for a lot of people, it's one of the major reasons they play MMOs. I'm not a huge fan of PvP. I'm actually a PvE player for the most part. But I can understand where they're coming from on this. And an MMO is the best place for something like that, where there are players everywhere for you to do this with.
Yes, I could understand you just, getting online and just wanting to, beat the shit out of virtual players. That's a stress reliever right there.
Yes, sir.
And then you have, I know that you have games, MMOs, which, they're not really games, well, they're games, but, have you ever heard of something called Second Life?
Yes.
Yes, I have.
Which, occasionally, I've, makes the news, because it's essentially, it's not really. I think the closest analogy that I could come up with is sort of like the Sims aspect of it.
Yeah, it's pretty similar. I think their main draw is the social aspect, the sense of communication, while still having that veil of anonymity.
Okay.
So you can get away with doing certain things in Second Life that you probably would be less hesitant to do so in real life because there's no real repercussion.
Yes, I can understand that.
So I mean, that's pretty much all I have on Second Life. It is a Sims-esque MMO with a heavy focus on communication and community and customization as well.
And I mean, there are other types of MMOs. I mean, I know that there's sports ones and racing ones. Um, pardon. Um, and I'm seeing this list of MMOs. Apparently there's an MMO with Magic the Gathering,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
like a MMO card game. I'm like, oh, okay.
That was a great idea that I'm really not a big fan of because you have
Don't
to
you play
rebuy.
Magic?
Oh yeah, I love Magic. I'd love to be able to play it online. The problem is I have over 20 years worth of cards. And when you play online, you have to start fresh, and you have to buy the cards again.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah. The problem with the Magic the Gathering online system is there's no way to say you have a particular card in real life and use it in the online version. You have to use the online only versions of the cards.
Oh.
And that costs real money. And we're not talking pennies here. We're talking actual
The exact same
dollars.
amount. The exact same amount as buying a card in real life, as buying a pack of cards in real life. So you can either devote your money, if you're a Magic the Gathering player, and this is my huge issue with the system, is you can either buy your physical cards to play in real life with people, or you can buy the online cards to play online with people. But if you don't have enough money to do both, you're screwed because you don't get extra money from this.
So you're kind of put in a position where you have to choose one or the other.
Exactly. And to me, I love MMOs, but I will choose playing in real life with my friends every time.
Well, good. Good. And with that is going to wind down our first half. On our second half, we'll continue talking about the appeal of MMOs. We'll talk about, we've discussed some very popular MMOs. We'll also talk about MMOs that have, quite frankly, sucked. And why some of these game makers continue to make MMOs knowing full well that they have a very losing track record. So that will be on the second half of this episode of Downloadable Content. We will be back. Welcome back to this second half of downloadable content discussing MMOs. We're still here. The two Rons have not gone, and had their lives sucked away by Warcraft, a la South Park. So, we're going to start this second half. We're continuing about the draw and, the appeal of MMOs. And we're going to start by having the audience listening to a little snippet brought to us by one of our other occasional panelists, Ben, who wanted to give his 2 cents on MMOs, and so I'll play it, and then we will react to it. And here it is.
If you took a look at my gaming habits, you'd probably think I'm one of the last people who would play an MMORPG. I tend to shy away from communal aspects of games, I hate leveling, and I tend to be against anything with a recurring build, all staples of the genre. My highest level character in any online game is under 30. I've run only one raid in my entire life, and I have trouble figuring out just how to talk to other characters, let alone speak their languages. At the same time, I normally prefer any title that lets me be the central point, and have all gameplay focus on my experiences from novice, to chosen hero, sports all-star, or kung fu expert. Yet MMORPGs hold a level of intrigue unmatched by any other game. On countless occasions, I've put down World of Warcraft and told myself I'm done with it, only to come back for a short burst months later. The allure of these titles lies not at all in the gameplay experiences, but in the massive worlds themselves. With no disrespect to fetch quests, the most fun I've had in WoW was when I got to beta test a then upcoming expansion, complete with full flight powers, to see the world from a whole new perspective. The massive mountains and valleys, the many methods of transport, and the endless sprawl of roads and forests drew me back in time and again. These games are built from an entirely different perspective from most other titles. No wonder so many entrants show up year after year for this category, many of which last less than 12 months before being shut down or moved to a free-to-play model. Being fun is a huge requirement in any title, but being engaging even when not requiring anything of the player is something very few games can pull off well. To me, almost nothing in gaming can top the breathtaking experience of looking around a well-made virtual world and seeing just how much work went into creating our digital playgrounds. I may never get used to fetch quests, I have no plans to form or join a guild, and I will probably never win an EVE Online trivia contest. At the same time, I don't think I'll ever really stop playing MMOs as long as I still play games. Even if I don't play with the same goals and expectations as most other players, to me, these games will always hold a special pull.
Okay. Now, knowing Ben as I do, and I know that Ben is not really the RPG player. As a matter of fact, I think he's, and I could be wrong, Ben. So once you hear this, tell me so. I think Ben's only beaten one RPG, and that was Chrono Trigger. In fact, it was him who introduced me to Chrono Trigger.
Well, thank God for that.
So what do you think? That even though he's not really an RPG player, he's still drawn to them.
I would agree 100% with what he said about the world being one of the big draws. I mean, for me, part of the reason I jumped into World of Warcraft when, up to that point, I had a disdain for MMOs was because I loved the world of Warcraft. Warcraft, the original games, and being able to go into that world and interact with it and see the history and meet the characters and fight alongside them, that was a huge thing. And the world was huge, much bigger than I'd expected going into it. There's always something to do. There's always something new to see. And if you're a story person the way I am, there's always something new to read or look at. There are books in-game that you can read about the history when you get to certain areas. It's an experience that I've never found a similar game single player to what I experience in MMOs.
See Skyrim.
Yeah, I mean,
yes.
there's a lot of. I mean, that's one of the reasons why BioWare has. I think they've done a really good job with Star Wars: The Old Republic, because for all of the. Yeah, that was BioWare.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah, BioWare's really done a lot of good shit
Anyway,
since
keep going.
they've done. Anyway, because they've their main quote unquote casual lure to the game, to the Star Wars MMO, was fully voice acted. Almost everything in that game has a voice to it. So, I mean, that's interesting in and of itself. But they focused a lot on the single player story aspect of it. Every character has a very unique, interesting story that is pretty, I would say, is probably at least on par with some single player games. And just the fact that you're playing in the Star Wars setting is cool in and of itself, because you get to hear the lore of the game. This takes place several thousand years before the movies, so so first off, you can go visit Alderaan and not have it be nothing but space dust. There's, like, you see Coruscant, you see Tatooine, you see all these storied places in Star Wars that you know of, and along with other planets that you may not be familiar with, and see the environments in them. You get to interact with the characters there, see their personal strife and what they're trying to achieve, all the while you may be going for your own personal arc and goal of getting more money or saving the Republic or the Empire or whatever.
Okay, I mean, and I could see. I mean, Star Wars has an already established fan base. It definitely appeals to the hardcore fans of the movies.
Going into what you were saying about Star Wars, that actually brings up a good point about MMOs, a negative that we haven't touched on yet, which is when Star Wars: The Old Republic came out, that's when Star Wars Galaxies ended. And, I mean, if you're playing an MMO, you might be lucky and you might have something like Anarchy Online that's still going now 10 years later, or EverQuest. But even popular MMOs, they'll go out of style and the servers will go down, and when that piece of software you have on your computer is useless when there's no servers, nothing to play on.
That is one drawback, and that's an excellent point. I mean, you've spent all this time, energy, and possibly money, to create this character, and then, whoever's running the servers, decides to pull the plug.
Yeah.
I'm sure that feels like once that decision is made, I'm sure you feel like that you've just wasted a lot of your, time.
I mean, yeah. to give them credit, a lot of the companies, especially nowadays, they don't tear the servers down when they cancel the game. They'll take all the servers and combine it to one server and keep it going. There's actually a company online, separate from the other ones, that basically takes dead MMOs and they will keep a server alive in their place, and they just get a small monthly fee from the company for doing it, rather than have the company keep dealing with it. But,
yeah, you also have the option too of private servers, because, say, for example,
if available,
if it's available, because I know Aeon, for example, has private servers available for use and purchase. I would imagine Tabula Rasa probably has one as well.
It does not, and it's one of the biggest problems with the fan base. They refuse to. They're basically, the company's trying to screw Garrett, and they refuse to allow external servers. People have been trying to backwards engineer it ever since the game got canceled.
That's interesting. I'm kind of surprised by that, considering NCSoft generally.
NCSoft made a lot of bad decisions when it came to Tabula Rasa.
Yeah, I agree. Knowing
basically, it all comes down to the falling out between the company and Garrett, and the company basically. Tabula Rasa at that point was his baby, so when they had a falling out and they decided they were going to get rid of him, they basically screwed Tabula Rasa hard as part of it.
Yeah, that's pretty dumb move on NCSoft's part.
Yeah, they lost a lot of fans from that.
Yeah, and private servers are, at least it's a way for some games to have a small fan base kept alive. Brian mentioned briefly the economy of the games and the politics in the intro. There is quite a bit of internal economy in these games. I mean, my personal example is I went from one server on Aeon to another because of, I wouldn't say drama on that particular server, but it was just becoming to the point where they wanted me as a person to be involved in daily, if not hourly, occurrences on that game, and then fuck no, I have a real life. I'm not going to spend all of it playing this game and dealing with your personal bullshit.
Which is another thing I've heard about on giant MMOs like Warcraft, where it can get pretty soap opera type of dramatic with possible spillover into real life.
Oh yeah. I've run a guild in World of Warcraft before, and I've been in many other ones, and you can, if you have a good group of people, it'll be relatively easy, but when you have a bad group, especially like the guild I ran was basically when Burning Crusade came out, I just created a guild to play with my friends, and I had like 30 or 40 of our friends and their friends together, and oh my god, the drama that happens when you play with people that you know in real life, oh, it's bad.
I mean,
really bad.
I don't know what's worse, drama with people you know or people you don't know.
Yeah,
people you don't know.
Yeah, well, sometimes because people you don't know actually become people you do know.
Oh yeah.
And also what can be a blessing and a curse too is if your game has a PvP aspect and you become a skilled enough player in PvP, you eventually get known as that guy.
That guy.
My brother is that guy. He's been number one in his set of servers in World of Warcraft for like 2 years running. He has the Deadly Gladiator set or whatever it is. They're the one you get from being number one in PvP on a set of servers.
Yeah, and you basically get a giant bullseye paint on your back.
Exactly.
So kind of like being in first place in Mario Kart. It's
You're waiting for that blue. Yeah, you're waiting for that spiked blue shell to come up and rape your ass
several times. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
8 of them all at once.
Yes, and I can understand why that would put people off, but I get the impression that the drama is not a big turnoff. I guess it doesn't happen often enough.
Well, it's not necessarily that the drama doesn't happen often enough. I think one of the things we didn't touch on yet is one of the draws for a lot of the MMOs is the guilds. Is you band together with this group of people to try to become, for different ones. Some of them are for role-playing, some of them are for advancement in the game, to go through different things, raid guilds to go through the end game stuff. But a bunch of people coming together for a common interest. None of you know each other for the most part before this, but you come together, you become friends, you become a tight-knit group of people going through this stuff together. It's the bones of the social aspect of it is the guilds.
Oh, it's a fellowship. How cute.
Yeah, we're not going to ring into a volcano just yet, though.
I was going to say, I'll say one of the most frustrating things, just as a little anecdote here, that I've ever did in
story time.
When I used to play World of Warcraft, there was something that was released called Magister's Terrace, which was an instance that was released towards the end of the game, which was the hardest instance in the game. It had the only upgraded item that I could get at that point. So I found a group of people, and I went to go into that instance. And my item didn't drop. You can only do that instance once a day. I did it once a day for over 3 months. Every day. With a similar group of people. Had a great time with this similar group of people. We got to the point where we could ruckus through it extremely fast, had fun doing it, and that's one of the good aspects of it. But then you have the aspect of, I'm spending 3 months of my life trying to do one part of this game every day for a couple hours, to get one item that let's see, 3 months, 1 day, so over 90 times for an item that's supposed to have a 15 to 20% drop rate. That's the frustration in how they do these games. Of the grinding that's necessary to get to the end, the drop rates for the items where you would have no guarantee that what you're going in is ever going to drop for you, no matter what the drop rate thinks it is. Just the frustrations that you have in a single-player RPG that are magnified 1,000 times because in an MMO, they design it in such a way to take as much of your time as possible without making you realize that you're doing it, and give you just enough reward over a short enough period of time, just small things over a period of time, to make you feel like you're making progress whether you are or not.
3 months, at that point I would have given up. I would have been like, fuck this game, that's that. That just sounds like way too much work.
And the worst part about my little instance that I had in World of Warcraft was there's an item that drops in there with a 1% chance of drop rate. Now, my item had a 20% drop rate. I saw that 1% drop rate item show up 4 times in the 90 days, while mine's never showed up once. Oh. Okay, let's continue.
All right, now that you've ranted, all right. Now that we've talked about that, I want to shift on to... We've talked about a lot of very popular RPGs, MMORPGs, and, Warcraft is definitely probably the most popular, having somewhere around 60% of all MMO players. That's a huge chunk of people.
I mean, when you consider that with how many MMOs there are out there, and the rest of the MMOs split that 40 amongst themselves, that 40%.
I mean, you do have very popular ones, StarCraft 2. I mean, Final Fantasy 11 is still going.
Well, I'm pretty sure the number there does not include StarCraft and StarCraft 2, because those technically are not... They are MMOs in our definition, but in most general definitions they are not. Because when you connect to a server where there's a bunch of people where you can make games, but the individual games themselves aren't connected to the greater world.
Yeah, alright. Whatever.
But yeah, the reason why I'm saying that is because if those were included, StarCraft would beat out World of Warcraft.
Really?
The original StarCraft is practically the state sport in Korea. It's still played massively in China, and it's still played all across the US even to today.
Interesting.
Yeah. I would agree to that as well. I would suspect StarCraft and StarCraft Brood War probably have at least 20 million players on it still.
Interesting. Now let's talk about, we've talked about some very popular MMOs. Now let's talk about some MMOs that fell flat on its ass. The first one that immediately jumps to my mind is a very recent title, Final Fantasy XIV.
And Final Fantasy XI just right behind it.
Well, Final Fantasy XI at least had a modicum of popularity. I mean, it was, somewhat well received.
You can say it was well received in certain aspects, but let's put it this way: it was nowhere near what Square anticipated, and as far as they've said multiple times, that they considered it basically a failure.
Yeah, the problem with 11 was they thought it would be like a ball out of the park, grand slam.
The World of Warcraft killer, that's what they called it.
Yeah, that's what they're
yeah,
calling.
right.
Well, I mean, at the time, when the game first launched, like World of Warcraft was still vanilla, wasn't it? Or was Burning
Yep.
Crusades just out? So
And no,
yeah,
it was still vanilla WoW before everything else. And I mean, at that point, yeah, it was the dominant MMO, but nobody knew how big it was really going to be. And I mean, other companies, they all wanted to capitalize on it. They all had their own idea of what a World of Warcraft killer would be. And well, up to today, nobody still has.
And the idea behind Final Fantasy thought was, oh, we got the Final Fantasy name attached to this, and this is going to be fantastic. We just stick our name on it, and that's pretty much it.
I think that's been Square's problem with the last few numbered releases, but
yeah, that's their problem mostly, and I think they're starting to realize it. Is that you can't just stick the name on the product anymore and launch it as is. You have to actually have good
Final Fantasy XI made a lot of mistakes that World of Warcraft had fixed from EverQuest. It took the massive grindiness. It took the required now I said the social aspects are important, and they are very, very much. But World of Warcraft separated it where there are things that require groups to do, and there's also a whole other section of the game where you can do solo stuff you can do yourself if you want to. One of the major problems for Final Fantasy XI, and from what I understand 14 as well, was most 90% of the stuff in the game required you to be in groups for. And that antagonized a whole section of gamers like myself. I very rarely grouped in World of Warcraft except for instances. I preferred to be able to do my solo stuff, to go out there and be able to do stuff myself. Kill some time if I want to. Yeah.
It's, Final Fantasy XI, and I remember all the hype surrounding it. Remember all the hoopla, as you said, it was supposed to be the Square's answer to Warcraft. That, I think, was a Price is Right failhorn moment right there, and, it's just, it's still, shockingly, the game is still going.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably about 200,000 people who play it today.
There was actually a lot of outrage when they were talking about taking the servers down when 14 came out. And they ended up deciding not to do it.
Well, I guess that might have been actually a good idea.
Yeah, well, I think that's partly because 14 launched and they realized, oh shit, this game's still alpha.
That was the big issue. I mean, 14 had some ideas, but the implementation, it seriously felt like, as you put it, you're playing the alpha of a game. This game hasn't been beta tested. This game hasn't had people fixing the bugs. This game doesn't even feel like they finished designing it.
Didn't Square basically come out and say,
we're sorry?
It kind of wasn't ready.
Yes.
And
they're doing a re-release of it.
Yeah, because quite frankly, the game needed at least a year's worth of development, if not 2.
Squaresoft, the higher-ups, set a date that this had to be released by. The development team could not develop what they were told they needed to make fast enough, and when that date came, they were told, this date is set, you need to hit it. If it's not done, just put out what you have and we can patch it. Their opinion was, MMOs get patches all the time. World of Warcraft gets one once a week on Tuesday. Well, not always, but for a while they did. So if there's any problems in the game, we can just patch it. We don't need to put out a fully completed game. And that's something, Brian, you've touched on in the past, haven't you? About that frustration with game design where it doesn't matter if it's perfect, we can fix it later.
Yes. It's like
the development this first Final Fantasy 14 there's a problem there's a difference between having a small patch that fixes small bugs and putting out patches that are literally gigabytes in size as you add entirely new content that should have been in the game at launch.
Oh, agreed, 100%. This is the what we were talking about in the other podcast with Brian was, the small things. This is the same thought process that lets them put out games that weren't completely bug tested, taken to its natural extreme where, who cares if the game's completely finished or not? We can just patch it. It's definitely a more extreme view, but it's just the natural progression of that line of thought.
And unfortunately, Star Wars: The Old Republic suffers a little bit from this. Now, it's not nearly as bad as Final Fantasy XIV was, but there are certain things that are missing from Star Wars that should have been included at launch. And BioWare has come out and said, basically, yes, this game really wasn't done when we launched the game. It was done enough to the point where you could do it, and it would still be an MMO, but there are certain MMO conventions, like user interface customization, some other endgame content, that we just could not get done in time for when EA wanted the game to be launched. So they've basically said, like, any updates we do for the game are basically going to be free updates. They're not going to be... And they've already added an expansion to the game that included some personal customization options and some new instances, and that's free. They're having another larger patch coming out this month that's going to add even more stuff to the game. And they had already said, like, if we had launched the game when we felt it was ready, it would have included all these things already in the game. It probably would have launched in, like, April or May. But EA said that, no, they want a holiday 2011 launch.
Why?
And so they kind of forced them to do that.
Why are these companies putting out unfinished games?
Because the developer, it's the publisher wants the game. They want the money back on it. Star Wars has been in development for 3 years or so. They need their money. They need that ROI.
Yep, they will go, we're giving you this much money for this long to finish the game, and then when it gets to that point, if the developer hasn't gotten to that point yet, they need to release this game so we can start getting money back on it, because we planned on having that money to do other games as well.
Yeah, but if the game is not finished and upon release, you get horrible critical feedback as a result, then you're not going to recoup your money.
You're preaching to the choir here.
It makes no sense.
I mean, it's bad practice because the publishers always assume a game is going to sell well. They never take into account that what if this game does bad, or doesn't do as good as we hope, or doesn't sell as well as we hoped. They don't have a plan B. They're not really self-sufficient. They're relying on each game release to put food on the table. They don't have a safety net in place. Well,
with how much game development costs nowadays, it's really hard for anything but the biggest developers to have a safety net. Because, if you take a look, and Brian, we brought this up on the podcast before, about the cost of making the current style of 3D games, and how much it costs to make those graphics, and how much it costs to develop a game like that. You might need to release the game because you need that money back. Like, as a company, you need that so your stocks won't go down, and so that you can start production on the next game that people have been waiting for. And I'm not defending them. They shouldn't be releasing games that aren't finished. They should be taking more realistic things into account. But any programmer will tell you that when they're hired to do something, the people above them really don't understand how long what they want is going to take. They just give you a number that this is when it needs to be done by, and you need to figure out a way to make that happen.
That's just bad business practice right there, I think. Putting out an unfinished product. Or
well, Windows has been doing it for years.
Well, yes. That's a good one. So what other bad MMOs spring to mind? We have Final Fantasy 11 and 14, and Square, not learning their lesson from Final Fantasy XIV, they plan to release Dragon Quest X, which at first I was looking forward to. I was looking forward to Dragon Quest X, being that I am a, devout fan of the Dragon Quest series.
Maybe they are learning from their mistakes, and it's actually going to be a decent game this time.
You assume Square's got a brain. I think most of their brains have left the company by now.
The fact is that they decided that Dragon Quest X was going to be an MMO, and as soon as I heard that, I went, "Oh dear."
They've already butchered the Final Fantasy series and the goodwill that the people have towards that. Let's see if we can do a double header and destroy Dragon Quest.
I think they're on their way, because it's going to be Wii only.
And then what other big series do they have? Kingdom Hearts. We'll do Kingdom Hearts after Dragon Quest. We'll just ruin the franchise. We'll do a triple.
They already kind of ruined the Kingdom Hearts franchise. They released 5 games between Kingdom Hearts 2 and present day, and they still haven't even advanced the damn story.
Yeah, well, that's just cash cow milking. But Dragon Quest X. When I found out that it was going to be an MMO, my heart sank. And then,
well, a question for you. Now, let's be honest here. Is that more because of your not being a fan and having kind of a distaste for MMOs, so that means you're not going to be playing Dragon Quest X? Or is that because of their track record with MMOs?
That is primarily their track record.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to, putting that out there.
That is primarily, because I haven't played MMOs, I don't really have a positive or negative disposition toward them. When I found out that Dragon Quest X was going to be an MMO, knowing what I know about how badly Final Fantasy XIV has been butchered, I just went, oh, fuck. Oh, dear. That's it. Game over. Series over. I know Dragon Quest X, I know the Dragon Quest series here isn't as popular as it is in Japan,
Where it's barely second to Final Fantasy, and it has beaten Final Fantasy multiple times.
And the fact that it's like, okay, it's an MMO, alright, it's gonna be Wii only? Oh dear Christ. And I'm the first to defend Nintendo. I'm a Nintendo fanboy through and through. But
honestly, I know it's Dragon Quest, so I understand why they're doing it, but I don't think there's ever going to be a successful MMO that doesn't include PC as an option, because of the huge subscriber base. I mean, the majority of MMOs are played on computers.
Right.
Console's fine. I have no problem with them. Even if your focus is on the console release, but you are giving up such a huge market share by not doing a PC one as well, that I don't think we're ever going to have a widely successful MMO that doesn't include PC as one of the versions.
And so I'm pardon me if I'm extremely hesitant about Dragon Quest X, because I have 1 through 9.
I don't blame you at all. I mean, with their track record with Final Fantasy XI and Final Fantasy XIV, I'm honestly worried. I don't know what to expect out of Dragon Quest X. I'm not a big fan of the Dragon Quest series. I'm probably not going to pick up the game, but I'll definitely be looking at the reviews and looking at what people say about it to find out if Square can learn from their mistakes, or if this is just going to be another failure.
Well, if you find me sobbing in the corner upon the game's release, you'll know. You'll know why.
Are you going to be giving it a shot?
I probably will. Well, I don't know. Once I find out more details about it, are we going to have a subscription fee?
This might be similar to what World of Warcraft was for me, where I was a huge fan of Warcraft, the games previous, so it made me give it a shot. I'm wondering if this might do the same for you.
It might. It most certainly might. I mean, I don't. Final Fantasy didn't do it for me, but then again, when Final Fantasy XI came out, I didn't have the system for it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the PC capable of running it, and when Final Fantasy XI came out, I was a very poor college student. No way was I going to shell out, $15 per month of my McWages.
And by Final Fantasy 14, 12 and 13 have already disillusioned you to the game franchise.
12 didn't, 13 did.
Okay. I thought you didn't like 12
I
either.
love 12. So yeah, let me shift away from Square because there has to be other bad MMOs out there, not Square made.
To me, I'm going to complain about two things. One is, and this isn't a specific MMO, it's a breed of MMOs.
All right.
Which are the breed of MMOs that originated from Korea, which I'm not bashing all of them. But they're the little 2D anime-esque ones, which, Brian, you know me. How much do I love cute anime things? This should be right up my alley, right?
You'd think that every time you see a cute anime thing, you soil yourself.
You're correct. So you'd think these would be right up my alley. Well, no. What these are, for the most part, are cookie-cutter MMOs that they put out a couple of a year that take them almost nothing to do. I'll take them almost nothing. They'll just have one server up for them. They're all pretty much identical, other than small graphical changes or a couple different abilities. But I mean, it feels like you're playing the same game. There's 40 of them out, all of them at the same time, and there's nothing to them. The fact that they have so many of these because they're so quick and easy to make, you have no full subscriber base. So you don't have the social aspects you get of a larger MMO. The games all feel the same, and they're nothing special. So you don't have the fun that you get in some of the other games of it. I mean, they are the Farmville of graphical MMOs. There's 1,000 different versions, which technically should cater to anyone's taste, which is what they kind of say about these. And they don't cost you anything to play. They run off the microtransactions where to really progress your character, to progress the game, you have to pay money to them. But they don't tell you that up front. They'll let you play the game long enough so that you want to pay the money to try to get a little bit farther so you didn't just waste your life playing that game.
All right.
Those games are the devil.
And they make you cry and
Yeah.
sob. Okay. Ron, do you have any to throw into the pile of bad?
Unfortunately, my MMO experience is not that large enough, so I really can't comment on any bad ones.
A simple no would have sufficed.
I'm trying to think of ones that are particularly bad to stand out.
There was one that I was particularly interested in, but I currently do not have a PC to play it on. And that was the Lord of the Rings Online.
It's actually now.
It's free to play, and that one I can, from not personal experience, but from people who have played it, you might want to avoid it.
Yeah, well, no, Ron, they've done a complete overhaul of it. I've actually heard a lot of good things about it now.
Okay, because when they played it, they still were paying for it, and they said this is one you should avoid. But if they've done a complete overhaul of it, then and if it's free to play, then it might be worth a look at.
It was terrible. Originally, I avoided it like the plague. I read all the stuff about it. They overhauled it not a short time ago, a little while ago, but they overhauled the whole thing, and it's actually gotten a lot of positive information coming from it, positive reviews coming from it for it. So that actually would be something to take a look at.
Yeah, once I get a PC again, which I'm currently lacking at the moment. So as we begin to wind down here, since Ronnie took the question out of my head already. What are your favorite MMOs?
You want to go first, Ron? Or?
Yeah, I'll go first because mine's pretty short. I'm gonna stay the Star Wars: The Old Republic one because it's done a fair number of things right. The single player side of it is really strong. So if for nothing else, you could play the game for the single player aspect, beat your character's story and be done with it and just stop playing. And that in and of itself may only end up costing you, well, $60 for the game, then probably a second month subscription because you get a first month for free. So like for $75 or $80, you get at least 80 hours worth of content in that single player story. So that in and of itself isn't a bad thing. But there's instances that are fun. Their main selling point is the Star Wars lore. It's the Star Wars story, and they've done a really good job with it. If you've played Knights of the Old Republic, I can tell you this right now: the closest thing you're going to get to a Knights of the Old Republic 3 is going to be the Jedi Knight story. The PvP in the game is pretty okay. There's still class balance that should be worked on. There's a fair range of customization options in terms of skills, or not skill, yeah, skills to a certain extent, but how your character looks in terms of appearance. Gear disparity isn't as big as some other games. It really is more based on skill than anything else. And their update cycles are really fast. They've already done an update in January. They're doing a second major update in March. And their current development cycle is going to be including these updates that are like large patches that include new content like every 2 months or so. And they're really trying to avoid that expansion pack set up that Warcraft does, where you have to buy another $30 or $40 expansion to the game as well as paying a subscription fee.
Alrighty, Ronnie, you're on.
Okay. I'm actually going to, and Brian's going to hit me for this, but I actually don't have a favorite MMO. I'm actually going to bring up three games really shortly that are individually games I've really enjoyed, but for reasons they're not my favorites.
Of course you were going to say that, because that's just you.
I know.
Because you're a jackass like that.
I loved Tabula Rasa. The combat system for Tabula Rasa was something I think a lot of MMOs could learn from. It was doing something new while still being similar to the original, to the way that most people are used to playing, which is the EverQuest Warcraft style system. But first, the game's canceled, so you can't really enjoy it now. But also, it had no end game to speak of, and was very solo-oriented. World of Warcraft, to me, is the best one for the social aspects. Just period, with the way guilds are in the game, how they're connected to it, how they have their instance system, their chat, just everything throughout World of Warcraft makes it so even if you're not a player who enjoys many group things, it still sucks you into the social aspects without you even realizing it. And that is a really good thing for an MMO to do. Finally, the one that I hope, and it will probably be my favorite when it comes out, but I can't say anything about it now, would be Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 1, Brian, was a free-to-play MMO. All you paid for was the cost of the game. And if you wanted to, any of the expansions to continue different storylines. But you could play through from one game all the way to the end and have a complete story there, like a regular single-player game. It has my favorite class, which is the Mesmer, which I love, with its ability to curse people and prevent them from doing various things. But the ability to be unable to jump over the smallest of things pissed me off so much I could not continue playing the game. Such a minor thing. They promised us in Guild Wars 2 there will be jumping.
Ooh.
And I'm hoping, I think that will become my game of choice, and it is a free-to-play game, so, it doesn't charge a monthly subscription. It's not free in that you still have to buy the actual game, but with no subscription charge, if you ever get good enough computer, Brian, I may just buy you a copy of it so you can play with me sometime.
Okay.
And that's for me.
There you go. And obviously, I haven't played any MMOs, so I have nothing to add to that question.
Actually, wait, I'll say my favorite MMO was StarCraft. There we go. I forgot that counts.
Yeah, I was assuming the RPG aspect. If we assume it to the broader RPG MMO, I would say StarCraft 2.
I still play the original.
You are all widgets. Okay.
That's why you love us, though, Brian. That's why you love us.
Yes.
One thing that I think we'd be. I wanted to bring this up way back when, but
we'll bring it up now before we hand the floor to Ron.
Okay, what I was going to say is we never brought up EVE Online, which I think was throughout this entire podcast, which I thought was kind of odd now that I'm thinking about it, because I was going to bring it up.
I imagine most of the people that are listening to this are going, "Why aren't you mentioning EVE? You piece of shit!"
That's why. EVE Online, when we were talking about economy, I was going to bring it up, Brian, because it was developed by people in the business world and by economy majors in college who built this. It has an economy that is ridiculously detailed. It's a space one where you fly around in ships and you mine stuff and you can sell them, and there are pirates, but the economy in this game is so ridiculous it runs like a real country would. And I'm pretty sure they compared the global output of money that goes into it as comparable to small countries. It's ridiculous. But yes, I knew if we didn't mention EVE, at least in passing, sorry guys, we just forgot, we would be getting some people going, really? What's wrong with you people?
Yeah, well, there you go. You have mentioned, what type of MMO is it?
Sci-fi, PvP, mostly.
Is it an RPG?
No.
Ish.
Yeah, kinda.
It's kind of its own genre.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the best way I can describe it is it's space combat with a heavy focus on the PvP.
Yes, PvP, mining, exploration. You can be a dedicated trader in this. You know, just trading back and forth stuff, and you can make a very good living in the game. Just off of being a merchant.
Cool.
That's actually that's one of the major classes in the game, basically.
Excellent. So there we go. That pretty much ends our discussion of MMOs, what their appeal is, you know, what draws people to them, what are some things that turn people away from them. And now we hand it over to Ron, who is going to provide us with our cool moments in video games.
For me, I'm going with a particularly recent one, Mass Effect 2.
Okay, I'm going away for this one.
Yeah, Brian. Yes. Spoiler alert! Spoilers are going to be ahead in this cool moment.
Since I'm almost done with Mass Effect 1. I do not want to know anything about Mass Effect 2. So, Ron, I'm going to take my headphones off and just type into the chat here on Skype when you're done.
I will do so because I know this is a story that really should be not spoiled. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when this podcast drops, Mass Effect 3 will have launched, and I will be burying myself headfirst into it. So my cool moment is specifically at the very end of the game, you are getting off the collector ship as the bomb is going off. You're being told by the magnanimous enemy NPCs that it doesn't matter what you do, I'm still going to come to your galaxy and kill all life in it. And the entire time, your character just kind of basically saying, okay, you can still come to the galaxy, you can't really stop that. And even if you do try and kill us, don't really know if we're going to succeed. But by God, I swear to God in heaven, or devil in earth, or whoever the hell you believe in, it's going to be the biggest fucking slog for you to kill every single one of us. And as the bomb is going off, you're flying away, you get to have the nice victory music. As the credits before they begin to roll, you see your character like fixing his ship and trying to figure out how they can defeat this alien menace about to invade the galaxy, and then it cuts to the alien menace and hundreds of millions of ships flying up to the Milky Way galaxy, and you just get the sense of like, oh shit, some really big stuff's about to happen. And then with Mass Effect 3, obviously, you see how big this is going to be. So let me type in the chat that I'm done with it. So Brian can come back and do his closing thoughts.
Yes, I will, since I didn't hear a peep of that. Hopefully you all heard nuggets of wisdom there, as brought to you by the one and only Ron.
So one and only?
Well,
but you have two of us.
Yes, but you're Ronnie. You have
okay.
Yes, extra letters there. So, on our next episode of Downloadable Content, we are going to be discussing a pretty new niche in the video game industry, as it were, because it has exploded in popularity. I blame this on Angry Birds entirely. We're going to talk about mobile gaming. We're going to be talking about games that are on the various iThings and smartphones and whatnot, and how mobile gaming has just taken off like a bandit. That is going to be on our next episode. But before we get there, I'd like to thank our two Rons for joining me on this episode. Thank you very much for your commentary. You most certainly have enlightened me.
Glad to be here.
And that's going to do it. So, if you have any thoughts on this episode, complaints, rants, compliments, whatever, you can leave your thoughts over on Facebook and Twitter. Facebook at facebook.com/downloadablecontent, or on Twitter at DLContent. So for Ron and Ronnie, I am Brian. Have a good one, everyone. See you next time.